So we're very pleased to have received $14 million in provincial funding that will obviously enhance the care provided to our patients in Muskoka and surrounding areas. This was part of the provincial government's investment of up to almost $1.17 billion to support hospital bedded capacity at hospitals across Ontario. And what it means for us personally is now we're guaranteed funding for those beds that we were operating during a surge. So we were over capacity. We did what we had to do to make sure we were looking after our patients. But those beds were not funded at the time. And so it's great that they've recognized the need for these beds on a permanent basis. So this is permanent funding on a go-forward basis. So we actually, the beds are in operation, they have been, but now we're being funded for them. The other part of the funding announcement that's, I think, even more exciting is that it allows us to expand services. So there are some net new beds, and we got an intensive care bed, an additional one at both our Bracebridge and Huntsville site. So we now have 5 ICU beds in Bracebridge and 6 in Huntsville. We're also excited that we are to be designated to provide greater inpatient rehabilitation services. And so there's an additional 10 beds that came with that funding that is for rehab beds. It allows us some planning ahead to, we still have some planning ahead to identify how many of those beds at each site. And we're working through that, as well as recruiting for the specialized health human resources to support those expanded services.
Cheryl, for someone that may not totally understand the vernacular that we're using here of beds, because some people might say, well, why are they just buying beds for $14 million? That seems like a lot of money to buy a bed for. Maybe just give me an explanation as to what this means for the cost of what a bed actually means, the actual annual costs that come associated with each bed that you have in the hospital.
Right. So acute care beds, it's, a bed that's full almost 100% of the time, 24 hours a day. So those services aren't just for the physical beds, although if people, we will need to buy physical beds, people can reach out to our foundations and help us with that. It's to operate those beds 24 hours a day. So that's for staffing of all levels to care for those patients and equipment, et cetera, just to operate them. So that's the operating side. And then, of course, there's some infrastructure we need, as you mentioned, about those physical beds. But yes, that's what the $14 million dollars give us to keep going ahead.